Welcome to Blonde Cards and Crafts. Let's make something together. Hello crafters, today I'm sharing with you the April Love from Lizi 2021 kit. I'll leave an unboxing down below, but what I like to do with the stamps is I like to stamp out all the images, and then I will take my alcohol markers or my zigs, my markers in this case, and I'll color my images in. And then what I'll do is I'll mark usually on the back that this is the original one. I'll scan it onto my printer and then print up multiple copies. I like to keep the dies stored in these wallets with a little magnetic sleeve. And these are all my die cut out and some fussy cut out images, as well as the ephemera. We got a big pack of ephemera in this kit. So I store them all in this little, I suppose, artist palette. I got it at my local deals. It's Poundland or Target, whatever you want to call it, wherever you're from. But and the other one I made using 300 GSM cardstock for my bigger images and ephemera. I also keep on hand the peel-offs that we got in the kit, the enamel dots ribbon, and any of the extra bits. They're just off to the side there, beside where I'm crafting, as well as the sequins. Okay, so let's start with our first card. First card is a mini slimline card, and I have my 300 GSM cardstock here. This measures 7 by 6, and on the long side I'm scoring it at 3.5. I like to leave the cardstock in the scoreboard like this and use it to make sure I get a nice even fold. That way I know that when I look at the card, it's not kind of wonky, you know? So this helps work for me, and that's why I left it in there. So there we go, we have a perfect little mini slimline, and I'll use my We Are Memory Keepers scoreboard in order to make a 3.5 by 6 envelope for this card. Okay, so let's decorate it. I'm going to keep this as a nice clean looking card. I'm going to embellish it using the peel-offs that came in the kit, and they're this lovely blue, it's kind of a metallic blue color. I'm also going to use the stencil, and it's like sprinkled with love hearts stencil, and it's a really nice stencil. I'm going to use that on the card front. As well as that, I'm going to use some of the little flower pots. These are ephemera pieces that came in the kit, and I have taken my bone folder to those just to give them a little bit of shape, and I have stamped all the sentiments and fussy cut those out, so I have a load of sentiments there off to my left waiting and ready to go. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the stencil, and I just want to stencil about the lower, just below the halfway line, using that stencil. Now I would recommend that you tape down your card base and then put your stencil on and tape that down a little bit as well so that nothing moves. I didn't do that. The reason I didn't do that, I was lazy. So do as I say, not as I do. But I have to say the stencil is, it's a lovely stencil to use. I'm going to take one of the inks that I have in my stash, a lovely blue ink. It's kind of the closest color that I could get to the blue of the pinstripes, because I'm going to use the pinstripes above where I've stenciled, and that'll kind of be the line that my little pots and my sentiment can go. So there we are now. I'm making sure everything's nice and straight. I'm taping down the stencil, but I didn't tape down the card base. And it's just, the card base will move if you're not super careful. And I thought, no, it doesn't need it, but it does, guys, and I recommend it. The ink I'm using is a blue VersaFine ink, and I'm just going to lean over so I can get the name of it. It's Deep Lagoon is the color that I've used. So I have a blending brush, and these are just your general blending brushes from Amazon that I got 2 years ago. I leave links to everything that I use in this video down below. If I can find products that are in stock. If I can't find the products that I'm using in stock, I won't leave links. So, but you can see what I'm using, and it's really just to give you an idea and to help inspire you into using this kit, and if you don't have the kit, using what you have in your stash. So I have my stencil now all colored in. I've just realized I need to be a little bit careful along the top there, so I've grabbed a post-it note and I'm just going to use that to help me to get the end, the little hearts there at the top, without getting it onto my card base. Okay, so I've quickly gone through that, and now I'm happy with my little hearts. There is a little bit of blurring because the stencil moved a tiny bit, but I'm not, I'm not going to be too critical of it. It's good enough. So I'm going to wipe off my stencil. I don't want my ink drying on my stencil, so I'll give that a wipe, and then we'll move on to next. And that's putting my peel-offs up above. Now I'm going to do my best to make sure they're straight along the top. I don't have a line across here as a guide, which you could do. Definitely measure up however high up you want to go, an inch and a half, 2 inch, whatever you're doing. You could mark it up there on the left and the right side, and then just straddle the peel off across, which would be easier and quicker, but I'm eyeballing it. So I've used the thickest peel off that comes, and now I'm going to use the next size down. So we'll have 2 peel offs there across the top. And once they're on there nice and straight, I'll then just add a little pressure down onto them. And once you do that, a little bit of pressure down on them, it just makes the adhesive on the back of them stick that much better. So I definitely recommend that you do that. I'm going to trim off the little excess pieces, and then the bigger ones I'm going to put back onto my sheet because they can come in handy in other projects. Now I've put the fussy cut sentiment down roughly about where I want to put it, and this is going to help me to put down my little plant pots. Now I'm going to put the 3 down. I've put 1 down where I want it, and I know I want to straddle my sentiment over the first pot, and the first pot is going to have the little yellow flowers, so that's why I put my middle one down, but you could always start with the one on the right hand side. I'm just going to try and make sure that I get an even gap between the 3 pots so that it looks balanced. And once I've that done, then I'm going to put some foam tape, a little strip of foam tape behind my sentiment, and I won't put it the whole way up to the very end because I'm going to glue the end of the sentiment down onto the little pot. So I have my strip of foam tape on there, and I've just put a little dab of glue at the end, and now I'm going to stick that down using my tweezers, just help with the positioning of it. And I love this sentiment, long time no see, as in the herb thyme. And I love at the end of where the word see is, the very last E has a heart at the end of it that's just so cute. And you know what? It's these little details, I think, that just make it really cool. Okay, so now all I want to do is put some sequins down, and the sequins that we got in the kit, there's a lovely mix of colors in it, and the little bowl or dish that I have my sequins in is a little ashtray. In my local pound shop, or little cheap shop, they have these little ashtrays, and they're like 50 cents each, or I think there was 3 for €1 or something like that, and they're just the handiest little things for holding small bits of stuff in the craft room. So no, I don't smoke if you see that the bowl is actually an ashtray. I used to many years ago, but I gave up. But that's what I use these little ashtrays for, holding little bits, and they're just perfect for the sentiments. So I'm going to put 3 sequins there around that little pot, and then I'll put 2 sequins over on the bottom left hand side. And then to add to that, I'm going to take my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen and I'm going to add a little bit of glitter to the flowers. And I'm also going to take my Glossy accents and I'm going to put some drops of that into our sequins. I like that the look that it gives the sequin, rather than it being empty, it kind of gives it a full clear bead inside it. And I'm also going to put some of the Glossy accents on the little flowers in their flower pots. And then that is card number 1, our mini slimline card. For card number 2, I'm going to make a shaker card. So I have my card base here and it's a 5x7 card base. So it's 10 by 7 and then scored at 5. So I'm going to fold that over. And this is a ready-made shop bought card that I'm using the bone folder on here. I find them just as handy as cutting a sheet and making my own, especially for the larger sizes like 5x7 and 6x6. So I have that ready there to go. I also have this sand colored paper or card. It's 4 3/4 by 6 3/4, and then I have this piece measuring 4.5 by 6.5, and I've used the stencil to do this. So I've put the stencil down, gone over it in a pink color, then I have turned the stencil 90 degrees and then gone over it in another color, and I've done it in 3 different colors: a light pink, a dark pink, and a sandy brown color. I'm also using some of the ephemera from the kit, these 3 wreaths, as well as that flower. And because these have a hole in the middle, what I'm going to do is put a hole into the patterned paper that I've made, and then through that we'll see our sequins for the shaker. So I'm going to put the 3 of them more or less along like this. And I'll use some punches to punch out the end ones, and then for the center one where I'll need a hole, what I'll do is I'll use a die for that. So I like to just trace around the inside of the circle. That way I'll know that the die or the punch I use is going to punch out a little bit more than that, but less than the size of the wreath. So once I have that done now, I can decide whether I want to punch it or die cut it. So I have a couple of punches in my stash. One of them is a Stampin' Up punch, and it's the 2-inch Stampin' Up punch, and I reckon this will work perfectly on the large wreath, and I'll be able to get at it enough to punch out the center by coming in from the side like this. So I'll use the punch. I'm just making doubly sure that it's not going to be too big, and I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the placement, so I'll then punch that out. Perfect. Now for the middle one, I'm just kind of looking and I can see that that size, that 2-inch punch would be too big. So I know I need to use a smaller size, and I don't have one in my stash. This 1-inch punch is going to be perfect for the smallest wreath. So I'm going to go ahead and use that. And then off screen, I've gone ahead and I've die cut out a little circle using a die from my stash for the center wreath. So that'll give us our 3 openings there that we can see through with our wreaths. On the back side now I'm going to place some acetate, and this measures roughly 3 by 6, so we need it to cover up those openings. I'm going to use some double-sided tape on the acetate to secure that in place. You can use a red liner tape or a regular double-sided tape, but anything that's going to be a strong adhesive. I wouldn't really recommend a liquid glue for this. With acetate, the liquid glue, when it dries, it can just pop off. So I definitely recommend a good double-sided tape. I'm also going to put some double-sided tape around our circular openings just to help the acetate stay in place. So once I've that all ready, I'm going to put my acetate down on top of that. Lovely. Now you'll see there on the left hand side where the small circle is that some of my tape is actually over on where the opening is. So from the front side, there's some sticky tape, but I didn't mind because I knew that my little wreath was going to sit on that, so you wouldn't see it and you wouldn't feel it. Okay, with that done, I'm going to use some liquid glue and I'm going to stick down the wreaths on the front of my handmade pattern paper. Once I've that done, then I'm going to use some foam tape on the back. Now, I recommend when you're using sequins that you do a double layer of foam tape. And what I like to do is take a long length of the foam tape and fold it over on top of itself. And that way then you have the release paper on both the back or the top and the bottom of the foam tape. And this I find is great, especially if you want to trim the foam tape down to a thinner width. So I have my foam tape here now and I'm going to start sticking that down. I'm putting the foam around the wreath openings, and that way I'll have a smaller area to fill with my sequins. We get a small bag, it's like a sample size bag of sequins in the kit, and so I don't want to go filling this whole area with sequins because it would be lost and you wouldn't see the sequins because the openings are quite small on this. So I'm going to make sure that I put my foam tape around each of the wreath openings, and then I'm going to fill the rest of the back of this card with some foam tape because I don't want any dips on this panel. So I'll always make sure I put some foam tape around the four edges and then fill the inside as I need it. And you can see there, I haven't filled the whole space with foam tape, just enough so that it doesn't dip. I'm putting this strip of white card, which measures 2.5 by 6.5, on the back of the sequins, just enough so when I flip this panel over and stick it down onto my sand colored matte layer there, all the sequins won't fall out. And I find that this is easier than trying to put the sand color one down on my panel and get it down evenly. So that's what I do, and I have leaned over this and eyeballed it to make sure that it's as centered as I can get it, but I just edited that bit out. Okay, so once I have those two together, now I can put some liquid glue on this, and then I can put that on the front of my card. And as you probably know, I use the liquid glue a lot for things like this, just because it allows a little bit of wiggle room. I can move it up and down or over to the sides just to make sure it's centered. Now all I need to do is put down my sentiment, and I have glued that down flat, and then I'm going to use the watering can rather than the little bunch of flowers, and this watering can I stamped and coloured in and die cut out as well. So now all we need to do is add a few sequins to the front of the card, just to kind of tie the sequins in the shaker with the front. So I'll put 3 there to the top left, I'll put 3 to the bottom right, and then I'll sprinkle a couple, about another 3 around the front of the card. And again, I'll come in with my glossy accents. I'll put some in the sequins. I'm going to put some of the glossy accents over my watering can, and then final touch will be my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen around the wreaths, and that will be my shaker card, my 5x7 shaker card, all done. I love this. I love the soft colors of the hearts, and I think if you did them in masculine colors, maybe the blues and browns, it would be a great card for a guy. Okay, so let's move on to card number 3. For card number 3, I'm going to use this 6x6 card base, and to make one yourself, you get a piece of card measuring 12 by 6, and on the long side score it at 6. And my card is going to be a top opening card. And the reason for that is because the bottom is going to be joined with a strip of card. On the front, I'm going to die cut this window, and it's the only window die that I have in my stash. It's a little bit large, but I like the look of it. I wanted the idea of someone stood inside a room looking out the window and into the garden, and I think that's achieved with this card. So I've taken some pattern paper, and I think this, you'd kind of get away with this as wallpaper. So I'm going to stick that down on the front of my card, and then I'm going to die cut out the window. And when I do that, I will open up the card blank so it only die cuts through the pattern paper and one side. So this is our little strip of paper that we're going to use for the tent. And you can see I have 3 score lines here. I have a 1/4 inch little tab on one side and a 1/4 inch on the other. And I'm going to then put that inside. It'll stick on, one will stick to the back and one will stick to the front, just like so. And this is just to give you an idea. And I'm going to use some double-sided tape on those tabs there to stick that onto the card. So the card won't open like a standard card. This will allow it to open about 2 inches in width when fully extended. Okay, so that's our card. You imagine that we have the window die cut out, and when you look through the window, you're going to see a garden shed, a little lady outside, and she's about to start, you know, a bit of gardening, or maybe just finishing up a bit of gardening. I'm going to put one of the pots ephemera pieces, the watering can, which I stamped and die cut, and this little, it's the icon of the shovel with sentiments on it. I'll actually put that on the shed rather than in her hands. I'm going to use 2 ink cubes, one in blue and one in green, and I'm going to put an image, you know, like sky and grass on the inside. Okay, so that's all our bits and pieces for our card. Let's go ahead and start assembling. So the first thing I'm going to do is stick down my patterned paper to my card base, and I'm going to use a liquid glue. And I find, for me personally, I like to ensure there's a lot of glue, but very thin amount all around the back of my pattern paper, because I don't want to die cut out my window and then parts of the paper not be stuck down. So once I have that done, it will leave behind this image of our pattern paper. I'll take that out. I've die cut another window frame, and I will then inset that. Now, I forgot to record doing the blending, the ink blending. So I'm doing this on a separate 6x6 card to show you what I've done. I have just die cut out this cloud border on some 300 GSM cardstock, and I did the same with hills. And then I just blended on my sky and my hills background. I then stuck down my images. I've put some acetate behind my window, and then I've put my white window frame on over the acetate. So now we get to the important piece. This is our tent piece. And I have put my double-sided tape on one of those little tabs, and I'm going to stick that onto the end bottom of our card. And then I'm going to do the same with the back. And once that's done, then it allows the card to open up, but not open up fully. But I love the idea of it. I think it's so unusual and different. I really do love that. I'm going to take my sentiment, which is don't let things bug you, and I'm going to straddle that halfway across the window. On the back, I'm going to take a panel, and this measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I'm going to stamp my sentiment, enjoy the little things, and this is from another stamp set that you can get from From Lizi's website, and I'll leave links to that below if it's still available. So I've stuck down a pair of wellies that I stamped, coloured and die cut out, and I'm going to put this panel onto the back, and this gives us somewhere for us to write our message to the recipient. So there you go. There's our tent fold card, and you know what, the video doesn't do it justice. It's so much better in person. I love this style, I really do. For card 4, I thought we'd make a center panel card. So I have a card base measuring 6 by 6, and to make one yourself, you'll need a piece of card measuring 6 by 12, and on the long side, score it at 6. I'm going to have this as a top opening card, and I'm going to cut out this middle part of our card base. So to do that, you can either measure down 2 inches from the top and then measure up 1.5 inches from the bottom. And if you do that on both sides, put pencil lines across to join them, you can then cut out the center panel. For the inside, I'm going to use a piece of patterned paper, and this patterned paper measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. I've cut a piece of this patterned paper and it measures 1 3/4 by 5 3/4. And then this piece for the bottom measures 1 1/4 by 5 3/4. And with this center piece cut out, we're going to straddle the two of them using our garden shed, which I have stamped and colored in. I have this piece of white card and it's for the inside, and it measures 2 3/4 by 4 3/4. And this is going to give us somewhere to write our sentiment, and it will lie behind the shed. I have again stamped and colored out my little girl, and I'm going to use some of the plant pots ephemera that came in the kit. So I'm just going to show you here. I'm going to mark using my pencil along the left hand side and the right hand side. So from the bottom, I'm going to come up 1.5 inches, and I'm just going to make sure that my ruler is at the right position, and then mark 1.5. And then I'm going to mark down from the top, and I want to mark down 2 inches. So when you have that done on both sides, you can then draw a line between the two, and this will help you to then cut out your piece of cardstock. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and there you go. Magic of editing, isn't it great? So we have our card base and our bottom strip that we're going to keep. Now on my patterned paper, I'm going to put some liquid adhesive on that, and I'm going to stick that down. And then I'm going to put my patterned paper on the front top part of our card base. And I thought this kind of looked a bit like the sky, you know, in a funky kind of way, but that's the blue. That's what I was going with there. So I'll stick that down nicely. And then I'm going to add my patterned paper to my bottom panel from our card base. So I'll stick that down, giving a nice border all around. And then I'm going to straddle the two with my garden shed. Now I'm going to stick the top down. I have an idea of where I want my shed to be placed. So I'll put some liquid glue just across the top, and then making sure that it's right where I want it, I'll stick that down, and I'll add just a little extra bit of glue there. I didn't put enough down. Okay, once that's down now, I can make sure that my little bottom panel there is flush with the bottom of my card. Then I'll add some liquid glue to the bottom of the shed, and then I'll stick that down. And that gives us our front 6 by 6. I've got my little girl here, and I'm going to put some glue on her. I'm only going to put some glue on one side of her. I have shaped my little plant pots, given them a little dome shape, and I put some foam tape behind them. So now I'm just checking to see where I need to put my glue on my little lady or my little girl, and I'm going to stick her down. What I'm also going to do, and you will see this later, is I've die cut out just a white image, just using a white piece of cardstock of the shed. And the reason for that is I'm going to stick that behind the shed, and I think it tidies up the back of the card, but it also strengthens this front panel on our card as well. So I'm going to put my little cockerel up there. I can't remember what the name of those are called when they're on top of a house, and my little plant pots. And I love that I've domed the plant pots, and I just think it gives a cool look to the front of the card. So here's our panel. I'm going to put glue, liquid glue on one side. Then the side that doesn't have any glue, I'm going to place that behind the shed, and that will help me then to line that up on the bottom of our card. Lovely. So when you look down, you can't see where our panel is. So here's the extra shed I've die cut out, and I'm going to place that behind our coloured image. I'll use again some liquid glue for that, and this will just help strengthen that whole front of the card, and it tidies things up, I think, as well. Perfect. I love that. Okay, next we want to put a sentiment on our card. I haven't put any sentiments on the inside of our cards that we've made today, but I can come back to that at any stage and add a sentiment as I need for the cards. So now I'm going to use a little bit of my Spectrum Noir sparkle pen to put a little bit of sparkle on our plant pots and the little girl and on our eyelashes, etc. And then I'm going to take my glossy accents and I'm going to add some glossy accents to our watering can, to the sentiment, welcome to my garden, that's on that little shed, and to some of the flowers in the pots. And I'm also going to take one of the enamel dots. I thought the blue would be nice, and I'm going to stick that down on my shed door as my little door handle. And I took a little black pen then and drew what looks like a keyhole underneath that. So there we go. There is our center panel card. I think this is so cool. It's so different, and I hope you like it. And now we're moving on to our final card, card 5. And this is what I'm calling a backward easel card. I know there's probably another name for it, but that's what I'm calling it. I have a 6x6 card base, which I've scored at 3 and 6. And rather than folding over on our score lines and making a mountain fold here for our standard easel, I'm going to do a valley fold. And the reason for that is the panel that we're going to put on top of that, we're going to use that as our stand. So this piece of white card, I have 2 of them and they're 4.5 by 4.5. I'm going to sit this nicely onto that panel, and this is what's going to stand up against our little stopper. And I just love the shape of this. I think it's such an unusual way to fold the panels to get an easel card. And there are a couple of tutorials on YouTube for this, and I just thought I would share it with you. So I'm going to use one of the ephemera pieces on my panel for the front. I have one of the sentiments, find your inner peas. I'm going to put that on the front. I have some distress ink. I'm going to do a blending for behind our garden shed. This white panel, like I said, is the second one. It's going to hide behind our easel panel. That way you won't see our inside sentiment or message. So now we're going to go ahead and have a look at the pattern papers. I have cut these 2 and they measure 2 3/4 by 5 3/4. And I've put these in the blue for the 2 panels. This one of our little ladies measures 5 3/4 by 5 3/4. And I had a strip of leftover that I'm going to use as the stopper for my panel for the easel to rest against. And that little strip is a 1/2 inch by 4.5 inches. So that's everything more or less ready to assemble our card. What I'm going to do is take my picked raspberry color. I just felt the other one was too light a color, you hardly see it. This one is a bit strong, but I think it makes the pinkish tones in our ephemera piece really pop, and I just love it. It pulls out the pinks as well in our patterned paper. So I have some foam tape behind our main image, and I've put some foam tape behind our sentiment. And I'm going to stick those 2 down. I just think it looks so cool. I love it. I'm going to take one of the peel-offs and I'm going to straddle that across the front. I just wanted to bring in the peel-offs into this card, and I thought this would be a nice way of grounding our shed, and then it also separates our shed from our sentiment. And you can see there I've put in a piece to join that together at the back, so when you open it, it's one full strip. Now for our card base, I'm going to put our large panel of patterned paper down. And again, using the liquid glue, that'll give me a little bit of wiggle room to try and get it straight. I use the word try. I'm the queen of wonky, guys. So I'm also going to glue my 2 patterned papers down, and just be aware that if your patterned paper you're using, some patterned papers you can put them down any which way you like, and some of them then are directional. So if you're putting a directional paper down, make sure it's in the right direction. Fab. So there's our 2 panels. The next thing I'm going to do is stick down then our focal panel. And I want to make sure that my border around it on the whole card when it's closed is more or less the same. So you can see there, I just put my liquid glue towards the top half of my panel, and I'm applying a little pressure to make sure it sticks down properly. And now we're going to put our panel for our sentiment behind that. And that way then we'll know exactly where it needs to go. So I'm putting my glue on one side. The side without glue I'm going to lay down on the back of our panel, and then lie that whole thing down. And I know now that when my card is closed, that panel is exactly behind our front panel. Our little strip of patterned paper, I've added some foam tape, and I've put 2 layers of foam tape on this, and that'll be the stopper for our focal point. Again, I'm going to pop down one of my peel-offs, cut it to length, and then I'm going to take some of the ephemera as well as the little boots. I have 2 little yellow boots, or Wellington boots, or welly boots. I have those. I'm going to glue them down. I'm going to take one of the little watering cans, and this one is an ephemera piece, and I'll glue that down. And then I'm going to take 3 of our little garden tools, and I'm going to stick those down in there. And once I have these stuck down, I'm going to take some of my glossy accents, and I'm going to put some on all those little ephemera pieces there, as well as to the watering can and some other bits and pieces on the front of this. And you can see it folds flat really nicely. I'm also going to put some Nuvo drops on the front of this card, but you could use the enamel dots that came in the kit. And there, my friends, is card number 5. And I hope that you have enjoyed my 5 cards using the Love from Lizi April 2021 card kit. If you enjoyed my video, you might click on the like button down below. And if you're a subscriber, thanks for subscribing. And if not, you might consider clicking on the bell icon. That way you'll be notified every time I post a new video. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And until next time, thanks for watching my video. Take care and bye for now.